Hello and welcome to Kuma English Listening Hub. Today we are going to step aboard a very particular kind of journey. Not a frantic dash through airport security, not a mad scramble for a budget flight, but something altogether more civilized. Slow travel by train across Europe, and what it reveals about how we move, think, and live. At first glance, slow travel sounds like a bit of a contradiction. In a world obsessed with being faster, cheaper, and more efficient, why would anyone deliberately choose to go slower? Why sit on a train for 12 hours when you could be in the air for 2? Why meander when you could sprint? Yet, as we will discover over the next few minutes, slow travel is not about wasting time. It is, if anything, about reclaiming it. It is about turning the journey into something meaningful, rather than a tedious obstacle between you and your destination. So, find a comfortable seat, imagine the soft rumble of wheels on tracks, and let us set off. Let us begin at London St. Pancras International, that magnificent cathedral of glass and iron. You stand beneath the great arched roof, listening to the murmur of announcers and the gentle hiss of espresso machines. Around you, people are not rushing in quite the same blind panic you find at airports. There are families with suitcases on wheels, couples leaning on each other, business travelers in slightly crumpled suits, all waiting for the train that will glide them under the channel. Slow travel in this context does not mean old-fashioned or inefficient. The Eurostar is, after all, a high-speed train. What makes it slow travel is the mindset. You have chosen a mode of transport that connects city center to city center, without the palaver of security queues that go on forever, plastic bags for your liquids, and that rather undignified ritual of half undressing for the scanner. On a train, you simply walk on with your luggage, find your seat, and off you go. There is something quietly human about it. You remain, quite literally, grounded. From London, imagine that you are heading to Milan, but not in a rush. You could, of course, fly in a couple of hours, land at some out-of-the-way airport, and spend another hour or two getting into the city. Or you could take your time and see the journey as a string of places, rather than a blur beneath the clouds. You start with the elegant departure from St. Pancras, the train sliding past Kentish Town and out through the suburbs. You catch glimpses of back gardens, football pitches, and half-forgotten industrial estates. Then the countryside opens up. Fields, hedgerows, the odd solitary oak, and those very British terraced houses lined up as if for inspection. Before you know it, you are plunging into the Channel Tunnel, and 20 minutes later you re-emerge into northern France. It is the same journey you might have made by air, but this time it has texture. You see it change around you, instead of simply teleporting from one climate-controlled terminal to another. This is, in essence, the philosophy of slow travel, treating the in-between as part of the experience, not an inconvenience to be endured. Now, it would be easy to dismiss this as a slightly sentimental middle-class fantasy. The sort of thing that looks lovely in a Sunday supplement, with an artfully lit photo of someone gazing out of a window, clutching a cappuccino. But let us be properly honest. Slow travel requires certain conditions. You need a bit of time. You need a degree of flexibility. If you are absolutely knackered after a long week at work and you only have a weekend to spare, you are unlikely to spend half of it on trains, however romantic the brochure. Nevertheless, something has shifted in recent years. More and more people are beginning to question the logic of endless cheap flights. It is not just about the carbon emissions, although they are hardly negligible. It is also about the experience itself. The sense that flying has become a sort of grim, low-level ordeal that we put up with in order to arrive somewhere nice. By contrast, long-distance trains offer a rather different proposition. They are not perfect, of course. Delays happen. Connections are missed. There is always that one person having a very loud phone conversation. But trains still retain an aura of calm that airports have largely lost. You can walk around, stretch your legs, visit the dining car, and watch the landscape slide by. You do not have to keep putting your bag in an overhead locker at a funny angle, or wrestle for armrests with the stranger next to you. Let us move in our imagination from northern France to Switzerland. You change trains in Paris, perhaps, and suddenly you are on a TGV or an intercity service heading east, the scenery gradually crumpling into hills, then into mountains. At some point, you notice that everyone has gone rather quiet. People are staring out of the window, their phones temporarily forgotten. Out there, beyond the glass, are the Alps. Jagged peaks dusted with snow, valleys threaded with rivers, tiny villages perched improbably on steep slopes. This is where a slow travel stops being an abstract principle and becomes a visceral experience. You feel the train winding its way through tunnels and over viaducts. You sense the gradient beneath your feet. You are not hovering miles above the world in a pressurized metal tube. You are inside the landscape, moving through it. In Switzerland and Austria, there are famous routes designed precisely for this kind of journey. The Glacier Express, the Bernina Express, and any number of regional trains that are not particularly glamorous but offer views that would make a travel photographer weep. You sit there, perhaps with a cup of coffee and a slightly overpriced sandwich, thinking, this will do very nicely. For some travelers, particularly in continental Europe, slow travel by train is nothing remarkable. It is simply how they get around. They take overnight trains between cities as casually as others might take a bus. But for many British travelers, there has been a tendency to see trains in Europe as either a novelty or a faff. There is not always the same culture of planning rail journeys that you find on the continent. That, however, is changing. A new generation of travelers is becoming quite keen on overland journeys. They swap tips about sleeper compartments on social media, debate the relative merits of German and Austrian railways, and share slightly smug photos captioned with phrases such as 18 hours, 4 countries, no flying. Now, one might roll one's eyes and say, all right, mate, no need to show off. But beneath the posturing, there is a genuine curiosity. What happens if, instead of shaving every possible minute off your travel time, you lean into the journey itself? You might, for example, break a trip from London to Rome into several days. You could stop in Brussels, then in Cologne, perhaps in Zurich, then finally drift down into Italy via Milan or Florence. Each stop becomes a miniature trip in its own right, and the long journey is transformed from a single, exhausting slog into a chain of smaller, more digestible adventures. Of course, we cannot talk about slow travel by train without mentioning the environmental dimension. Flying, as most of us now know, is disproportionately polluting. For short and medium distances, the carbon footprint of a flight can be several times higher than that of a train, even if the train is powered partly by fossil fuels. Many European countries, and indeed the European Union itself, have begun to invest more seriously in rail infrastructure as part of their climate strategy. There is now talk of flight shame and the need to wean ourselves off unnecessary air travel. Some domestic flights have even been restricted where a reasonable train alternative exists. Now, one can argue about the politics and the practicality of all this. It is not as simple as saying, right everyone, on the train, job done. There are questions about cost, accessibility, and the quality of existing rail networks. British listeners in particular might be thinking of their own rail system with a certain amount of skepticism. But the underlying point remains, if we are serious about reducing emissions, then shifting a proportion of our journeys from air to rail is almost certainly part of the solution. And if that shift can be made enjoyable, not merely dutiful, then so much the better. Slow travel in this sense is not about being saintly. It is about aligning what is pleasurable with what is sustainable. It is about saying, I am going to take the train, not only because it is better for the planet, but because it offers a richer experience. If that sounds a bit idealistic, fair enough. Yet, as more night trains and international routes return to the timetable, it is becoming more realistic than it once was. Let us spend a moment with a very specific character, the solo traveler doing a long overnight journey, perhaps from Vienna to Amsterdam. It is late evening as the train pulls out, the city lights receding into the darkness. In your compartment, you have a fold-down bed, a narrow wardrobe, and a surprisingly compact sink. The smell of clean linen mingles with the faint odor of metal and dust that seems to cling to every train carriage. You lie there, listening to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels, feeling the gentle swaying motion as the train rattles through the night. Every now and then you glimpse a lonely station platform, a single lamp burning in the darkness, and a few half-asleep passengers shuffling on or off. It is not exactly luxury, and it is certainly not glamorous in the way that old films might suggest. You might be woken in the small hours by a border guard checking passports, or by someone in the next compartment snoring fit to shake the walls. The mattress is fine, but not fabulous. Yet there is something quietly magical about going to sleep in one country and waking up in another. You draw the curtain in Austria and open it again in Germany or the Netherlands. You arrive in the morning slightly rumpled, but with the satisfying feeling that you have traveled somewhere, rather than simply popped in and out. For language learners in particular, slow travel provides an immersion that a quick flight can never really match. You overhear conversations in the corridor. You decipher signs in multiple languages. You have that slightly shambolic, multilingual exchange with the conductor who switches between German, English, and possibly a bit of French when you cannot quite understand the announcement. It is a language in motion, not language in a textbook. And that is priceless. Of course, it would be disingenuous to pretend that slow train travel is always idyllic. There are delays that stretch on for hours, connections missed by a matter of minutes, and rail strikes that seem to appear out of thin air, as if designed specifically to ruin your carefully planned itinerary. There is also the cost. International rail tickets can be eye-wateringly expensive if you are not organized. While there are rail passes and discounted fares, snapping them up requires a degree of forward planning that does not always fit with real life. Sometimes you look at the price comparison and think, blimey, that is a bit steep, and end up booking the flight regardless. And there are simple practicalities. You have to carry your luggage through stations, up and down platforms, often without the comforting presence of a luggage trolley. You might find yourself wedged into a crowded carriage, perched on your suitcase in the vestibule between two wagons, thinking, this was not quite the serene, mindful experience I had in mind. Yet, even with all that, many travelers report that they still prefer it. The irritations of train travel are somehow easier to swallow than the rigid, often dehumanizing rituals of air travel. A delayed train can at least be walked around on. A delayed plane tends to mean hours sitting motionless in a departure lounge with nowhere to go. Slow travel is not about pretending that these drawbacks do not exist. It is about accepting them as part of the story, rather than as evidence that the entire project is doomed. There is also a cultural element that is easy to overlook. Train travel, especially in Europe, has a rich history. From Agatha Christie's murder mysteries on the Orient Express to the backpackers of the 1972nd Interrail generation, the train has long been associated with a certain kind of romantic adventure. In Britain, railways are bound up with the story of industrialization, class divisions, and even national identity. Think of the branch lines cutting through the countryside, the little stations immortalized in films and television dramas, the commuters reading their newspapers on the 8:17 to London, or the chaos when leaves on the line. Bring everything to a grinding halt. Choosing to travel by train is, therefore, never entirely neutral. You are stepping into a web of associations, some nostalgic, some political, some deeply personal. For older travelers, it might evoke childhood holidays, leaning out of the window to feel the wind on your face. For younger ones, it might symbolize freedom, that first big trip across borders without parents, armed with nothing but a rucksack and a slightly crumpled timetable. Slow travel by train connects you to this broader narrative. You become part of a tradition, even as you make it your own. Your particular journey, with its own quirks and mishaps, fits into a larger tapestry of stories that span generations. For English learners at a high level, reflecting on slow travel offers several useful challenges. The topic itself is rich in nuance and requires you to handle quite subtle distinctions between convenience and experience, between speed and depth, between individual comfort and collective responsibility. To talk about slow travel, well, you need advanced vocabulary, terms related to infrastructure, sustainability, culture, and emotion. You need a command of complex sentence structures, to express reservation and doubt, to concede a point before undermining it, to weigh competing priorities without oversimplifying them. And you need idiomatic language to capture the emotional texture of travel. You might say, for instance, the idea of spending 14 hours on a train sounds like a nightmare, but once you are settled in with a book and a view, it is actually rather soothing. Or, flying is brilliant when you are in a rush, but you do lose that sense of being properly on the road. Or even, I used to be dead set on flying everywhere, but now I am quite keen on taking the scenic route, provided it does not blow the budget completely. Notice how these remarks weave together informal expressions, hedging language, and fairly intricate grammar. That, in essence, is what C2 level English allows you to do, to sound natural and sophisticated at the same time. As we begin to pull into our final metaphorical station, let us draw together some threads. Slow travel by train is not a silver bullet. It will not magically solve the climate crisis, nor will it always be the cheapest or most convenient option. It is not for everyone, and it is certainly not feasible for every journey. Yet, it does invite us to reconsider what travel is actually for. Is it simply a way to move bodies from point A to point B as quickly as possible? Or is it a chance to experience places in between, to notice transitions, to recognize that distance still matters in a world that likes to pretend it does not? When you choose to cross Europe by train, you accept that it will take longer, that you might arrive a bit tired, that there will be moments when you question your life choices. But you also gain something, a sense of continuity, an understanding of geography that is felt, not just seen on a map, and memories that consist of more than airport lounges and cramped seats. You remember the elderly couple in the dining car telling you about their hometown? You remember the station in the middle of nowhere where the train stopped for no obvious reason, and everyone groaned, then laughed, then shared snacks. You remember the child counting tunnels in the Alps, or the way the light changed as you crossed from one region to another. Those are not spectacular moments. They are small, almost forgettable details, but together, they form the texture of a journey that feels, for want of a better word, real. So, the next time you plan a trip and you are automatically about to type your nearest airport into the search engine, you might just pause. You might ask yourself, is there another way to do this? Could I go by train, even for part of the route? Could I, in effect, take my time? You may decide that it simply is not practical. Fair enough. Life is complicated, and not every journey can be a grand experiment in mindful exploration. But every so often, when the stars align and your diary is not completely full, you might look at the rail map instead of the flight schedules. You might discover that the world between here and there is richer than you thought, and that slowing down does not mean doing less, but experiencing more. For now, though, our journey together is sorted. Thank you for listening to Kuma English Listening Hub. If you found this episode useful, you can listen again, perhaps focusing first on understanding, then on pronunciation, and finally on picking out new vocabulary and expressions. With repeated listening, you will start to hear the rhythm of natural, educated British English and make it your own. Until next time, take care. And if you do find yourself on a long-distance train across Europe, do look out of the window from time to time. You might be surprised by what you notice. Cheers for now.